is growing fast at 30% CAGR because it's a tiny market right now. It is niche. So I'm really surprised at Zenitech. I get that they're trying to differentiate themselves with their drone offering and what they want to do for SaaS companies. But I think by focusing on quantum computing, they've made themselves a niche player.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Analysts Gone Wild. I'm here with just one of the best groups of analysts around the world, and we're going to go through some key topics today, but Robert Kramer with more insights and strategy. Let's get started. Let me introduce you to some of the group here. We'll start off with, we have Sam and John and Charles and Jan. Why don't we kind of go through the group here, and then we'll jump into our topics. But happy to be here today and excited to hear what you all have to say about these great topics. So, Sam, you want to introduce yourself, and we'll kind of go around?
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Robert, once again for hosting this. And I'm his partner in crime here on this show. Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. I have been covering the enterprise software space for 40 years now. So I'll stop there. John, you want to go next?
Absolutely. John Santaferraro here. 30 years in the data analytics and AI industry. I'm an independent industry analyst, and I'm the token data guy. Apparently, in the world of applications, data and AI are important now.
Great. Jan?
Yeah, hi there, Jan Burian here. Yeah, I'm actually wearing two hats right now. So one is the head of industrial insights for Trust, which is an IT service provider, a global company. The other is actually the analyst part, and so I'm like writing, publishing about, let's say, emerging tech and geopolitics, everything all together.
Wonderful. Charles, glad that you can make it on.
No, of course. Thank you for having me, team. My name is Charles. I work at Nucleus. For those who aren't familiar, we're a global provider of technology research and advisory services that focuses on return on investment. And I specialize in the enterprise software, especially around Europe, supply chain. I come from an e-commerce background, and yeah, really happy to be here today to discuss the topics.
Sounds fantastic. So, Sam, why don't we jump into our first topic, and it deals with HubSpot. They made a pretty big acquisition before the end of the year of Frame AI, and a lot of you guys probably know about that. But unstructured data is a big deal, and I don't know if a lot of companies really understand what they can do with unstructured data, but there's a ton. It's about marrying that with your existing data. And Charles, you're pretty familiar with your enterprise background and how unstructured data married with structured data can make a big difference. So why don't we kind of kick this off? Sam, do you want to piggyback on what I just said and kind of go around the horn here?
Yeah, definitely. I'll provide some background, and obviously I would love to hear from everybody else as well. So overall, from the HubSpot perspective, their marketing positioning is primarily from the marketing automation perspective. They are into the CRM suite space as well, but they are not transactional as strong. In general, their market positioning has always been more from the content perspective. That's what they are known for. That's their bread and butter. So this is really, I personally like this acquisition, to be completely honest, because now they are trying to gather as much data, which I'm generally against, to be completely honest. I don't want to mix the transactional data as well as the unstructured data. But in this case, it does make sense, but they are probably not going to have the complete picture, because if you try to make, and I'm pretty sure John is probably going to have some comment there, if you try to make your transactional application data warehouse, that's probably not the smartest idea in my personal experience. Because number one, then you are trying to bring everything in one platform, which might be okay in some cases if your sales team, marketing team, they are going to use that data. But in general, I like to keep these two things separate, architecturally speaking, data warehouse as well as, CRM. So that's from my side.
I think it also depends on the industry that you might be in for whether this unstructured data has merit. But John, why don't we go to you first? I know you probably have a handful of things that you want to lay out here for us.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart move for HubSpot because they had to make a build or buy decision, and I'm assuming that with Frame AI, they're going to advance faster than they would have building it in-house. And kudos to them, by the way, for not just tacking on generative AI and saying that they were doing real AI or agentic kinds of work just because they have a Gen AI engine tacked onto what they were doing. A lot of application vendors are doing that, and it becomes obvious real quick, and it's not working. It doesn't go deep enough. Now, that said, we've been trying to bring the worlds of structured and unstructured data together for a long time. I remember all the way back in the early 2000s, e-discovery, right? Looking at email and text, that was the starting place for unstructured data. Then documents came in, and that is going to be the hardest thing. So if you want to know what to watch HubSpot. If you talk to them, ask them about how that integration is going. My guess is it'll be 12 months before there's a real merging of the two together, if they can do it at all. And what you're going to end up still with is two separate sets of intelligence, one based on structured data and one based on unstructured. I hope that's not true. I hope HubSpot, I hope you guys can figure that out.
So I probably agree with you, but I'll put my thoughts on it at the end. Jan or Charles, got some feedback here?
I think the biggest thing here is that there's a lot of value that customers can get, or organizations can realize from leveraging this unstructured data, right? Getting insights into customer sentiment, ultimately improving that customer experience. From my perspective, I think this is a necessary step forward. And John, you kind of mentioned it, right? It's an acquisition rather than building in-house. I think it's going to just rapidly deploy these capabilities. I think customers are going to realize value faster. So that's my first thought off the bat.
Jan, what do you think?
I mean, there's not much left to say right here, but I'd say what matters here is also the how fast this gonna be delivered to the customers, right? So that's I would say that's a question, right? So when the customers could really be like a benefit from this conversions, let's put it like that. And of course, it's also all about like a use cases, right? Like finding a use case where the also as John correctly said, right? Structured, unstructured data all together. This is what actually unlocks the power of the solution of the platform.
Yeah, and I also think it's the quality of the data and that unstructured data being categorized where it can be tagged and used and married to the structured data and then used from there. So I think some of that's not 100% known and how it's going to be used. I think this is one of those things in the field right now where structured data and unstructured data, it's not used as prevalent as it's going to be used. It's one of those things where I think integrated solutions like this will be a big help down the road. Sam, what do you think at the end before we move on to the next slide?
Yeah, so some more layers there, I guess I would like to add, and I would love to hear follow-up from you guys as well. So a couple of things. Number one, the whole AI force. Everybody's trying to invest in AI, and this is going to be in that direction as well, because as we all know, I mean, Salesforce, Microsoft, and they are one of the biggest, CRM vendors, I would say, in terms of market share, right? HubSpot is there as well. They might not have as much market share as Salesforce, at least. That's my understanding. But I mean, they have been championing the whole idea of the AI agents. ServiceNow, they have announced that they are getting into the whole AI agents game as well, and the CRM game. So now, everybody is sort of threatened that the CRM market share is going to be hijacked a little bit. And then you have forces coming from Pipedrive as well. And I don't know how much, you guys track them. Pipedrive has been moving ahead, compared to HubSpot. HubSpot was never as aggressive in the acquisition game. But recently, they have acquired a lot more. So, John, to your comment, whether can they build something like this, especially with the speed that AI is moving, I just don't believe so. So this is a very smart move, because now this is going to give them the real sales, AI agent capability. And that's where I guess everybody's trying to argue that that's where you are going to have the biggest benefit from the AI perspective.
Yeah, I think the missing piece for me still, and again, this is up to HubSpot to figure out how when they glue these two together, are they going to be able to utilize one AI capability across the entire customer journey? because that's, I mean, everything they do is moving somebody through that marketing funnel, right? Turning them from marketing qualified leads into sales qualified leads, sales qualified leads into opportunities, right? So if they can put it together, that's the huge opportunity. I think that remains to be seen.
And I think that's the thing with every acquisition, right? It sounds great from the beginning, but actually integrating it and actually deploying these capabilities to your customers is a whole other thing. So kind of remains to be seen. That's my
Good point. All right, why don't we move on to the next one, Sam or Jan, unless you have any more. Okay, so we have Zenatech. They're making a pretty big acquisition here. Wanted to see what you guys all think. You know, quantum computing is, want to get your take on what everybody thinks of how that's affecting the workforce, how it's increasing productivity. It's one of those things. We have a lot of companies that are getting into that now from that perspective, and it's making a lot of headway from an efficiency standpoint. It's a new technology, not a new technology, but it's a newer technology that's starting to be adopted. And wanted to see everybody's take on that. Who would like to kick it off first on this one?
I think I can have something to say right after that. I have a few colleagues that work at the quantum company D-Wave Solutions, and that was one of their use cases was around workforce scheduling, you know, kind of optimizing that. So I think this is a great step forward. Obviously, quantum, I think this will be generally adopted, you know, 10, 15 years down the line. But I think this is the next necessary step forward. I mean, it's all about optimization. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
What do you think is necessary for it to be successful? Because you said down the line, is it the data? Is it the company resources? What do you think it is?
I think it's more the adoption by customers, right? I think that's the biggest thing. From my understanding, you know, customers are even kind of hesitant to adopt, you know, AI agents, for example. So I think as quantum computing becomes more readily available, cheaper to utilize, I think customers will take advantage of it. That's really my reasoning for the delay. Is I think it's the customers actually adopting and understanding that these solutions can probably be more efficient. That's what
Do you think it's a narrow focus from an industry perspective, or is it carte blanche?
When you mean narrow focusing, you're talking about in terms of workforce scheduling. I'm just a little confused.
For manufacturing, or do we see it healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, or do we see it going more widespread to other industries? Or
I think this can also lead to public sector. The aviation company. I'm familiar with some financial services organizations looking at some quantum computing solutions. So I think it's kind of expanding, to a bunch of different regions. Like I said, I think it's just going to be a slowly but sure process. But a lot of organizations are looking to solutions like D-Wave to optimize certain processes like workforce scheduling, whether that's logistics, production. I know the city of the Port of Los Angeles had a pretty significant use case with D-Wave. So I think this stuff will be slowly adopted over the next couple of years, and it'll be interesting to see.
Great. Who else would like to put their
maybe my thing here would be, I probably need to, let's say, better define what quantum computing does mean in this context, right? Because at CES, right, you probably all heard Jason and Huang, right, saying that quantum computing in like a real, let's say, at scale in a real life, it's gonna take maybe 10, 15 years, even more, right? So the question is, what kind of differentiation, or what was the differentiator here now, right? So saying that, okay, we leverage quantum computing here and there, maybe, I don't know, is that really like a leap from the cost, like a large language models, right? So what's the
entry cost, it might be predicated on that. So is your entry cost high or low to get in to take advantage of the technology? Sam or John, do you have any feedback?
Yeah, I think we're very, very early in quantum computing. Even the statistics that Zenatech gave are that it will be a $4 billion market in 2030. That's 5 years from now. It's going to be $4 billion. That's not a large market. And it's growing fast. It's growing fast at 30% CAGR because it's a tiny market right now. It is niche. So I'm really surprised at Zenatech. I get that they're trying to differentiate themselves with their drone offering and what they want to do for SaaS companies. But I think by focusing on quantum computing, they've made themselves a niche player. So I think that's the biggest part of the story. It's in there. I'll give you an example. to date, there's not a great database that has been created for quantum computing. And it's coming along, but that could be 5 to 10 years from now that we have a hardened database for quantum computing where you can really rely and run applications. So I have a lot of questions just about this overall.
Well, that's why I thought the cost of entry is a big topic, not necessarily for today, but for companies that want to leverage it, knowing that if they can get in at a certain price point, if it's high, they're not, because maybe that's one of the reasons the market's not there yet. But Sam, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't know whether you guys recall, and not everybody was sort of in the email last week. This particular story, I really wanted to have Ian here. He found this slightly more amusing, this particular story. And I find this story funny as well. And the reason for that is if you really stick to the story, there's too much going on here. Number one, quantum computing. Number two, drones. Number three, scheduling. Okay, so now you are going to wonder what the hell is that? Okay, so number one, quantum computing, as you correctly pointed out, John. I mean, it's probably in the R&D phase right now. Not much commercialization happening for the quantum computing. Number two, okay, sure, you can figure out drones as a service, but then when you look at the scheduling component, you are thinking probably categorically speaking, probably ERP, WFM. That is probably going to be your ACM component. Where else have you seen scheduling? Some people might argue that that's probably going to reside inside maybe CRM, sometimes e-commerce, but this is different. I mean, this is getting into the operational boundary. So you are going to wonder, okay, what the hell is happening with the workforce scheduling and how the drones are going to monitor that. So that's where my loss is, to be completely honest with this story. Okay, but if you pay attention to some of the details, I can see some details there. For example, when you get into the real traffic management, weather forecasting, border control, that's where you are going to get some benefit. But again, in my mind, I think this is all over the place. That would be my assessment.
I think it comes also down to what's the business impact. I think features and functionality are great, but at the end of the day, does this benefit, from a business standpoint, and will I be a better company? I think as companies look at their technology stacks, they're trying to find a way to reduce them, where it's more focused on how do I grow with my technology and reduce technology instead of adding more production facilities, adding more resources, and adding more technology. How do they get it where it's an efficient and a system that can grow on its own? So can this add value to that? We don't know. That sounds okay. Let's go to the next slide. And
I got one more thing I have to say. I wonder if these guys were flying those drones over New Jersey a month ago.
That could be right. We need to dig into that, John.
All right, let's go to the next slide. And we got some ERP stuff that's coming down the line, but we have this company called Bamboo Rose, and I'm not tremendously familiar with them, so maybe you can carry the ball here a little bit after I talk, Sam. But it's a retail management solutions, and they're one of those large companies. They agreed to acquire what gets its Vertigo and its automation platform for supply chain decisions, and it gives them a lot more intelligence. This just happened, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, Sam. You want to kind of add some value to what I just said?
Yeah, happy to. And I always get confused between Bamboo Rose and there is another company called Rose Rocket, and I don't know, Rose Rocket, I believe. I don't know whether you guys have tracked. This would fall under a retail system, supply chain centric. These two companies are very close, I would say, but one is TMS, and this is more of the retail suite. That's my understanding. So here they are saying retail management solution. So that would get into the layers of your POS, the merchandising, whatever you do from the retail perspective. Some people call them as more of the retail ERP. Blue Yonder is probably going to have all of this as well. So now we are getting into that bucket. So now what they are doing is everybody's getting into AI. So this is going to be the decision intelligence platform. But in my mind, for retail, when you look at this is more into the SNOP bucket. So sometimes there could be layers as well that, okay, do you want to mix data with retail? But in retail suites, that is going to be important. John is probably not going to like this because, he's all about separating your data warehouse from your retail suites. But in retail, there is a real application here. And if you look at some of the comments here from Gartner's perspective, they are talking it as decision intelligence platform, which I completely agree that that's probably the right bucket for them. What else do we have here? That's pretty much it. But I mean, they are really into that retail supply chain planning space. So this acquisition is going to give them the planning as well as the AI.
Well, I think supply chain, maybe Charles, you have some feedback here, is a big component of transactional operations because it allows companies to kind of go a little leaner and find ways to trim up the fat. And so I think this is probably a decent acquisition if it helps them be more efficient from their supply chain perspective. But Charles, do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, I think you taking a little step back and understanding that, retail supply chains are very complex, fast moving and ultimately really unpredictable. So I think having an intelligent solution that allows these e-commerce brands to, kind of optimize their omni-channel fulfillment strategies, stuff like that, optimize stuff like inventory, pricing, supplier management. I think this is a very smart move because, retail is complex. It touches every little facet of the world. So I think this is a strong acquisition. It kind of ties into what I said earlier. It sounds great. It really depends on the customer adoption, what ultimately, what customers use. That's ultimately my biggest thing. I think it's definitely needed. I think retail, you can even see companies been built off that. You think of the Shipiums of the world. These are mainly built for retail supply chains, improving their shipping efficiency, for example. So I think this is kind of that next step, and organizations understand that retail supply chains, like I said, are fast moving, and they need to kind of keep up with it. They need a certain capabilities for users to make the right decisions at the right time.
Great.
Maybe I have one note here. I can see that like Emburos, that exactly. I mean, they are more into the retail business, and with Vertigo, I can also see that they also cover the manufacturing, right? So, which is, as a manufacturing person, I would say interesting information here, right? So, question is, I mean, if it's like a collateral, or if it's something that Emburos could, let's say, leverage for some, let's say, get into another industry, right? That's my question here.
Yeah, I'll throw mine in too. And Sam, I actually like it because actually embedded business intelligence, decision intelligence is a big opportunity in 2025. I just in December spoke at a conference that was in London. There were 200 people, and it was entirely dedicated for one vendor and their embedded solution. So it's no longer an option. If you are an application, you have to embed intelligence of some kind. The thing I like about this acquisition as well is that it brings real time, and real time makes a huge difference, especially in retail, customer service, sales opportunities, offers being made in real time tied to inventory, forecasting. So having that real time element is, I think, a huge opportunity for anybody that's in retail. So it's the embedded, it's the intelligence, and then the real time brings an aspect. What I'm missing here is it's not clear to me how contextual it is, because in order to have real-time intelligence, you also have to understand the greater context of the application and of the retail business. It's not clear to me that this acquisition provides that. That would be the question I'd have for Bamboo Rose.
Yeah, and I'm actually seeing a challenge here with the integration with the two companies, specifically with the data, internal and external resources, and seeing how that works, because that's really the key. So if the integration isn't successful, then this is not a successful acquisition. If it is, obviously it's a winner. Sam, what do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to address Jan's question. So in this particular space, you are going to find these suites targeting manufacturing as well. But for the most part, if you ask them, okay, where are you winning? For the most part, their sweet spot is probably going to be retail. Retail manufacturing, they sort of go hand in hand. And one of the examples, and I think, Charles, you track them as well, right? So if you go to InfoNexus, they are primarily the retail suite. So now this is their competitor for the most part. Now, Nexus might target manufacturing a little bit, but they are not going to be as serious about targeting manufacturing, because, again, manufacturing is a very, very, very deep capability. The supply chain is going to be very different. Global trade management processes are going to be very different. The supplier interconnectedness, intertwinedness, you guys tell me the word, okay, is very different in the manufacturing space. So those are my thoughts.
Great. All right, well, let's cruise on. Let's the next slide. We're kind of making some good progress here.
Okay, so the next one, that's my job.
You got it. Content stack. This is a company that was founded, I guess, about 7 years ago, and I'm not really that familiar with them, but they are made an acquisition of LinkTex. It's a real-time customer data platform. And customer data platforms, I think, are a big deal because of the fact of obviously there's a way to kind of put all your data together and be utilized in a way that is actually can perform a little bit better. But LinkTex, was from James McDermott and Aaron Radin. What are you guys? What's your familiarity with data platforms and any context around this one? Sam, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I can piggyback a little bit. So overall, I guess if you look at the market, at least in last 2 years, and I'm pretty sure you guys are probably going to agree with this, that whenever you are going to have recessionary economy, okay, generally the trend is going to be of consolidation across multiple software vendors, and people sort of argue that ERP is dead, SaaS is dead. Recession actually makes everything look like an ERP. So what is happening here is consolidation. Now with consolidation, because everybody is trying to increase their deal size, okay, that's their motivation for. But from the customer perspective, what is going to happen is you are going to find a lot more overlap in general with these categories. So here, this particular consolidation, if you look at content stack, they are primarily in the CMS game. Okay, you have terms such as headless CMS, composable DXP, fancy terms, great idea. Now, these guys are all going to argue that, everything needs to be composable, etc. Great. But here, I think what these guys are trying to do is the composable causes a lot more problems. So now they are trying to consolidate it as well. So if you look at content stack, what they have is now they have combined the CDP, they have CMS, DXP. If you monitor this trend, you are going to find players such as your Playview, ActiveCampaign, they have done this. Very, very, very similar trend. If you go to Bloomreach, they are packaging this in a slightly different way. Optimize the API server. They were already very consolidated suite. So these guys are simply following that suite, and they are calling that this has more of the composable, which is not composable.
Yeah, good explanation. Just maybe a comment about ERP being dead. I think, and I just came from the ERP conference, ERP is probably the cornerstone of every business. It is the lifeblood. It's the anchor. And everybody has to align around them. The reason why you don't hear the noise around ERP saying positive things about themselves is they don't need to. All these companies that we're talking about need to align to them because that's where the data is coming from. That's where everything needs to happen because if your ERP isn't successful, you're not. But Charles, what do you think of this one?
I completely agree with your statement there, Robert. ERP system of records, the most important, vital, I would say, mechanism to an organization. Although I'm not too familiar with these organizations, I do have to say, kind of relates back to what we talked about in the last topic. Kind of the real-time data aspect of it. And now that with this customer data, the vendor is now able to provide, these like kind of personalized digital experiences for these customers. And I think that's the main benefit here. That's the biggest thing I have to add there. These personal experiences, I think that's the biggest thing. The customers are key, especially in the software world. So
agree.
That's my take on it.
Jan or John?
Yeah, not much else to say here. Right? So yeah, I think that's like a good move. Personalization, but also in our company, we do like a lot of integrations, a lot of stuff related to the hyper personalization even, right? So this is actually, this is where such a platforms might be good to leverage, but that's actually from my end.
I honestly think I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead, Charles. Go ahead.
I think this kind of goes back into Sam's point of that, consolidation in the market. And I think it's clear that we've seen it in a lot of areas, right, where a lot of vendors are going to acquire other ones to rapidly deploy these certain capabilities. And I think it's going to continue throughout the year. So I think that's the biggest thing now is that we're going to see increased consolidation, more M&A activity. So this is very interesting to see. I'm sorry to cut you off too, Robert.
No, all good. Thank you for that. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I don't see this as consolidation. I see it as convergence, right? Because you have a content management system and you have a customer data platform. And a content management system is a application. It's ERP. The customer data platform is data and analytics. And the customer data platform is really good at bringing all customer data into one single place. It's the old vision of the customer data warehouse that in the last decade has become a reality in customer data platforms. So the question becomes, what's the value of combining content management with customer data platforms That is powerful. The combined advantage is a highly personalized, highly optimized, highly automated digital experience across the entire customer journey. So that is incredibly valued. That said, I believe that this is very good for the content stack customers, because they now get all of the capabilities, all of the insight, all of the automations, all of the AI capabilities of a customer data platform. I'm not sure it's as good for the Lytics customers, because they're a customer data platform and they don't want to be tied to one part of the customer journey now. They want to be tied to somebody that can represent the entire customer journey. So that's my take.
Great. Any closing thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, I'll add something there. So I guess the real takeaway and my personal problem with this story is CDP as a category has real identity crisis. Is how I define it. It's being consumed by pretty much everything. The way, we don't sort of have the natural home for ESG category. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Everybody's trying to grab the pie because it's so hot. Everybody wants to make money from that category. So ESG, CDP, they both are fairly confused categories at this point of time. Maybe there is going to be some streamlining in the future, but right now it's being consumed by pretty much every category out there, and that's my problem, I guess.
Well, that's actually an interesting comment, because if you have a modern ERP system, I consider that a data lake, right? And so do I need a CDP if I have a modern ERP system, and then I have integrated via APIs to the solutions I need, but do I need a CDP if I have a modern system? So that's my closing thought, but anybody have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think if the modern system covers the entire customer journey, then the answer is yes. But if that ERP system doesn't cover the entire customer journey, then then you need a customer data platform, or you've got to now start customizing and building out your data lake, your own customer data lake.
Yep.
I'll add some points there.
Go ahead.
So overall, I guess ERP is just one of the categories. Even though ERP is going to do a lot in the architecture, when you look at these categories, there are probably going to be 50 categories that you probably need. Doing what CDP is able to do inside ERP is probably a horrible idea, to be completely honest. Because the reason why that is because for ERP, the data is going to be so tight, you would not be able to accomplish what CDP. So CDP is a category in itself. CMS is a category in itself. ERPs are not necessarily designed for that. That's my personal take.
I think some of them are going that way. That's why I mentioned it. So you have SAP, who has a data lake and data cloud for companies to take advantage of some of the things that we're talking about, but it's not at the level that you're describing there. So I guess where I'm going, and see what you think about this, is the data security. So I'm trying to, if I was the owner of that large manufacturing company, how do I have guardrails around my data to protect us the most? Do I want to have all these different solutions, or do I want to keep it in-house in a modern solution? So that'd be my closing thought.
So I'll address that comment as well. And generally, when you look at the workflow security, the data security, if you look at the Palantirs of the world or the newer data platforms of the world, they have come a long way, and they are going to include the workflow security as part of the data layer as well. But that is not sort of the enterprise federation data workflow security layer that you would require. And that's where your ServiceNows of the world sort of come in. They play that role. Obviously, that is probably going to be reserved only for enterprises. So here, inside this category, each of the categories are going to have their own sort of security algorithm, but then you are looking at the enterprise-wide algorithm. ERP, you definitely don't want to have ERP do that. That's probably going to be a really bad idea, to be completely honest, playing that role. And that's where I guess ServiceNow is playing a good role. There are many different platforms that can do that. And even SAP is going to have in their portfolio as well. Because if you look at the SAP S/4HANA architecture right now, it has become more of the best of breed. They have core, but then everything else is around that as well. So architecture is very similar. They have accommodated a lot more categories inside that. Sure, they might call that as ERP, but that's not ERP. ERP is just the core, but everything else around that is going to be all of these categories.
Great. Well said. All right, let's go to the next slide and keep everything going. So as you just mentioned, and me too, we have SAP and IBM have actually put together a partnership. They've actually been doing business for about 50 years. So this is nothing new that they're going to work together. IBM has their consulting practice that has a transformation component where they're working with most of the vendors, including Oracle, and helping out with their transformation. It's one of those things that the customer, I believe, is the most complex, not necessarily the vendor. And I'm not sure the stats. I think I wrote an article about this, but there's a huge amount of SAP customers on IBM Power servers, and they're trying to facilitate a way to get these companies onto the RISE program. Now, the 90 days, the migration, from my perspective, is not. I don't even think it's practical. Because I think a year is practical, and that's probably best case scenario. These companies going through these transformations, it's like probably one of the mountains that you have to climb without any clothes on. It is one of the hardest things. But if you want to modernize, you have to go through this. You have to be able to take advantage of new technology, all the things that are out today and going to be out tomorrow, and getting into IoT and IIoT and sustainability and all the different things that are going to be prevalent for you to have updated systems. You're going to need things like this. So what do we all think about this announcement?
Now, I have to agree with you, Robert. I think 90 days is a bit of a fairy tale. It sounds great once again, and these ERP transformations take a long time. And obviously with SAP, it's kind of notorious for stuff of that nature. But I think this is the move in the right direction, right? As a lot of these vendors think of like SAPs, Oracles, Unifors, the world, I'm going to say forcing their customers to move, on-prem to the cloud, but that's kind of the movement, right? But this is the first partnership where, the SAP realizes, hey, this might be a struggle. We're partnering up with IBM, and we've had, like you said, years worth of partnership experience. Let's try to help the customer out as much as we can. I think that's the biggest thing here. Once again, 90 days, a little bit of a fairy tale. We'll see. I would love to be proven wrong. I think that's one thing that remains to be seen, but a step in the right direction for sure.
We got a good crew here to talk about this. Who wants to go next? Sam, any feedback?
John, do you want to go?
Yeah. I'm gonna throw a little dart at it because it's like my question is, what is wrong with the SAP IBM relationship that they launched RISE in January, or was it April of 2021? And here they are almost 4 years later deciding to basically support this platform for IBM. It's like, is there a problem with the relationship?
Well, that's actually a good point, and I'm not sure if there is or isn't, but 2/3 of SAP customers are still on-prem. Maybe it's because the program isn't successful with this typical or this type of IBM server. They probably went and looked at so they have 24,000 SAP customers. About a fourth, maybe a third, have actually migrated to the new system. They're looking at what's the balance left, that gap, and how many of those they divided up by category. Where are they at? Maybe they looked at it and said, hey, IBM owns a share of this. We have a structured program. Let's marry it together. IBM Consulting's fantastic. Let's get this party started. Now, does that help the customer? Yeah. Will that shift this? I think it's going to take time because of the fact the customer is still scared to death to do anything. And if they're going to do something, they need some trust. And the trust, I think, is the IBM partnership. But Jan or Sam, what do you guys think?
Yeah, guys, but could you remind me, is it like this is definitely another the only partnership, right? So SAP's got, right? So we also have many partnerships with others, right? So why is this particular partnership that important to announce like this? Right?
Because of the number of customers that they actually have on that server and the knowledge that IBM Consulting has on moving them off the server, married with the program of RISE, which is a structured program to, for the migration and to handle the change management. One of the things I like about IBM Consulting is their garage methodology and how they actually look at how to structure these migrations and the transformation. And it allows them to really digest it and formulate a plan. And I think IBM has a lot of experience. Still, the customer, resources, change management, data management, those are all the keys to this puzzle as well. But that's my perspective. But Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'll add some colors there, guys. And I guess to your comments, and you guys are not off in your assessment with the 90 days. And that would be the assessment of any reasonable consulting firm out there, whether consulting firm, analyst firm, they're never going to 90 days. I mean, call me slow. I take probably 90 days to produce a report. Here we are talking about transforming the entire enterprise. Okay, so obviously IBM is not gonna be happy with that, and that's where you have the conflict. So this is not necessarily the problem with the relationship, but these OEMs, and again, there is nothing against SAP as such. This is the rat race that everybody is following. So SAP has to do that as well, to be completely honest. Okay, so this is the industry-wide problem in my mind. Okay, so now if you ask any of the partners, they are probably not going to agree. But then the bigger problem that we have in the SAP ecosystem that has not been brought up so far is that if you read the statements here, they are saying that the majority of the installations that IBM was doing, they were off-premise. And that is probably consistent across the majority of the SAP partners, SAP installations, even though if you look at their cloud growth, it is growing right now. It is growing substantially. But still, the majority of the share is off-premise. Not many partners have the skill set that they are going to be required for cloud. The cloud installation is very different. It requires very different skill set. They will not be able to do whatever they could do in their off-premise world, in the new world of cloud. And that's where this whole disconnect is. And that's why it is taking for IBM 4 years to be able to adopt, to be able to do what they are trying to preach from the RISE perspective. So now this is a good sign overall that at least they are in alignment, because now force is coming from the customers. Customers are buying the story that, hey, maybe it's possible. SAP is saying that. Okay, I want to try it out. Nobody can predict the outcome, but they are asking IBM, hey, why are you not giving me this? Why are you not giving me public cloud? So now IBM, it has to. That would be my assessment. But again, Deloitte, IBM, they all are going to have their own frameworks that they are going to position in competition with that. Okay, this is SAP's story, but this is what IBM story is.
Well, there's an interesting aspect to this too, in that IBM is a customer as well, right? So they have, I mean, they're in their release, they said that they moved their entire quote to cash and record to report processes to RISE on, of course, their own servers. And that impacted 150,000 users in 175 countries, 18 months, 30% reduction in infrastructure cost. So it is interesting from that perspective. There's some motivation for SAP and IBM joint customers to do it because IBM is leading the way. So I mean, I think that is what a great way to go to market. We did it. Here's the results. We can do this for you.
I think you're 100% accurate there. Truthfully, the way I look at it is I think it's a great marketing lever also. Robert, you said it, right? Accelerating that transformation, that modernization, right? Saying that, SAP is, we're committed to helping you guys out. We're not going to let you out to dry. We're forming this partnership. We believe we have, the power to, do this together. So I ultimately think this is a great marketing asset for SAP, to show their customers, saying, hey, listen, not only is IBM a partner in us, but they've done it too. Why can't you? And I think that's a good first step for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think SAP is finding ways to help their customer out here. Sure. They could not do this and say, hey, sink or swim at 2027, but they 100%. Need to get customers onto the new version. And I work with all the major, ERP vendors, and all of them are struggling to get customers to modernize. But if you don't modernize, you're going to get passed up because the companies that you compete with are. And then the technology aspect, you're not able to take advantage of that. So I would see this as a sign of SAP trying to help the customer out. And then I would love to see more of these to come, because they need to get these customers off of their older versions, because of the fact that, and here's one of the things I'm going to throw out, I think it's less expensive to modernize than to stay on-prem. If you look at all the indirect costs between resources and what it costs to keep those servers going and the technology you're missing out on, I think there's a big gap. I'm doing an analysis on this right now, but to show why there is a huge benefit from a cost standpoint and an efficiency and growth perspective if you modernize. But any closing thoughts on this, guys?
I mean, if you think about it, if you want to use AI, you need to be on the cloud. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? You talk about the technology advantages, and when you're on-prem, you're not able to take full advantage of that. I think moving to the cloud gives you that capability. So that's my 2 cents.
I would say, yeah, but on the other hand, I mean that like a hybrid approach, like when like a cloud, partially on-prem, it's still like in manufacturing. I mean, it's just like still probably the let's say, mostly adapted framework, right, or setup. So
I agree.
Yeah. So then, if you need to have like a good architect behind all that, and the consulting partner, integration partner, yeah, and that's probably doesn't matter if you want kind of like a ERP or which kind of hyperscaler you use, right? It's strategy first and tech later.
One question, one question, if you guys don't mind. And how is IBM's hardware business doing? Robert, I know you track that probably. John, I don't know if you get into hardware. Does anybody know?
I don't have any information on that. I know that IBM is still open for business on their hardware. So they have their hardware, their services, and their consulting and software. So I would say that they're very successful still with it. But I would also think it's one of those areas that will always stay in business, but it's going to decrease over time because of the cloud. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I don't follow the hardware business anymore.
Okay. So I actually used to work for an ERP vendor that we were partners with IBM, and we sold the RS6000 with our ERP solution on-prem. So that was that was in the olden days, and everything was a little easier. But anyway, okay. Hey, Sam, do we have any comments coming in? I know we got about 8 minutes left here. Has anybody posted anything? If not, we can go to the next slide. Or any more comments on SAP and ERP here?
Yeah, I mean, we can probably cover one more story. We don't have meaningful comments. We can just go to the story.
Yeah, let's do that. So Unit 4 appoints a new CEO. I think companies are always looking for change. This happened, about a week and a half ago, Simon Paris. I'm not familiar with them, but they are obviously changing because of the evolution, a new phase in their journey, and ongoing ERP solutions for modern technology. I guess from that perspective, Simon has a background in a lot of the things that we've talked about here, Charles, with SAP and Infor, et cetera. So, and I like his manufacturing background, but what do you guys all think about this?
To be frank, I'm very familiar with Mike. I'm not too familiar with Simon, so I think it's very interesting. I'm actually kind of curious where Mike will end up next. I do see CISPro here, but I think it's a step in the right direction. Unit 4 is making strides in terms of AI agents and whatnot. I just think that they kind of need a new accelerator. So I think this is an interesting touch to it. It did catch me by surprise, but I guess we'll see how it plays out. Really.
Any background you have on this, Sam? You want to add?
Yeah, I'll add some background. So Unit 4, I don't know how much you guys are familiar with that. They are one of the major ERP vendors. They track primarily the service category that is going to be your university, public sector centric.
Like consultants and whatnot, yeah.
Exactly. Those are going to be their patches for the most part. And I think overall, when I look at the transition, the leadership, when I look at their backgrounds, it was very interesting. For example, let's say if you look at Mike's background, okay? I think if my understanding is right, he comes from the whole success factors world. And in the service space, you are going to have a lot of ACM layer. Unit 4 is going to argue that, I have my ACM, I have my FP&A, and I'm going to be comparable with Workday, and that is fair comparison, right? So Mike actually comes from that world. He was part of Unit 4. Great idea. Okay, that's how you should be aligning the skill set, I guess, right? And then now he's sort of moving to CISPro, which is completely different. Because, that's manufacturing. Very, 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 very different background, even though he's going to have some ERP experience, right? The other layer I want to touch on is Simon's background. He comes from very manufacturing, at least that's my understanding. Okay, Infor, very manufacturing centric. But now he's coming here. For the most part, why this force is happening or why this movement is happening is all driven by private equity. Okay, in general, I would say last 4 years for any CEO out there, especially in the enterprise software, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. You can never meet your numbers. So these guys sort of got unlucky, to be completely honest. Okay, so whoever was the CEO, I think Cisco also announced that they are changing their CEO as well now. So I don't know who's the current CEO. But the previous CEO is gone just because we are coming out of COVID, and now we need sort of the new leadership to get to the next phase. And in this, I think there is going to be some sort of private equity alignment. I'm not too sure. Who's moving the cards here. But for the most part, I think Simon comes from very vista equity background, and that's why this movement is happening, because they are probably trying to get to the next phase. So that would be my take overall in this movement. We'll find out. I'm not going to judge right now, whether this is the right direction. But this is a very interesting move.
Agreed.
Yeah, one take on this is I think that people who have manufacturing experience, I think it's a pretty deep understanding of business, and it's that type of person could be used in other markets or other industries. And I think they add some value from that perspective. But just my 2 cents, because I actually have a manufacturing background, but so maybe I don't know as much as I think I know. Anyways, John or Jan, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it really matters anything here, right? Like a manufacturing background, if you're not that focused that too much on this aspect, right? So maybe it's more about like understanding of the data platform or some like a cloud suite thing. I'd say maybe this is the direction he's going to go, right? So yep.
John, what do you think? And then we'll kind of close out.
I don't think there's any data analytics or AI here, so I'm not going to comment.
Sam, you want to close us out?
Sure, happy to. And again, thank you so much, everybody for joining in for your insights. And I think, we'll do the closing advice with everybody. I don't know if you guys want to do this. So let's do, we'll start with Charles from the bottom. Charles, do you have any sort of closing advice?
Well, closing advice to executives, right? I think the biggest thing today is I think they need to look past, all the marketing, all the buzz that's going on right now, and really understand what value some of these capabilities can bring to the company, right? With the rise of AI agents, with all these acquisitions, really kind of finding out what the financial benefit is there, whether that's reducing costs, improving efficiency. So I think that's the biggest thing when evaluating these new announcements is try to tie it back to the financials there. What value would you get potentially as a customer or even as a customer? I think that's my biggest advice to any executive with all the acquisitions and announcements and partnerships going on, is really understanding what that can do for your company from a financial aspect. That's my biggest advice, biggest and best advice I can give.
And Charles, I forgot to ask for the plug. If you have any sort of plug, don't be shy. Come on, we are all in business.
Well, what do you mean for
any
a plug?
If people want to reach out to you, or if you have anything to
offer.
If
anybody wants to reach out to me, please feel free to reach me on LinkedIn. I'm readily available on there and happy to respond and set up some times to discuss. But yeah, that's the best way probably to reach me professionally is with LinkedIn.
Okay, amazing. Of course. Jan, closing advice and a plug.
Yeah, all right. So my, let's say, remark to the tech buyers would be really like, it's about the strategy first, right? Understanding your internal needs, understanding the trends, and text later, right? A little bit, right? That's how I see it, like not the other ways around. So yeah, that would be. And you can reach me out. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. And I also publish quite a lot for Industry Week. So if you would like to read some of my articles for leadership stuff, just go ahead and let me know if you like it.
John, advice and
Yeah, I'm gonna end with a quote from Malcolm Gladwell in his book Blink, because the speed that things are happening right now, don't blink, right? He says, often a sign of expertise is noticing what doesn't happen. So as you're looking at what people are presenting you with in mergers, in new announcements, figure out what's not being said, what's not happening. A sign of expertise is noticing what doesn't happen. You can contact me on LinkedIn. Check out my ferraroconsulting.com for some of the services that I offer from marketing strategy to industry analyst services. And then check out my podcast, my new podcast, The Digital Analyst. 7 episodes so far, 130,000 views. It's going well. Would love to have you join me there.
John is a popular guy. Robert, closing advice.
I would say your data needs to be in order to take advantage of all these advanced technologies, to kind of go back and look at the quality of your data, because that's really going to set yourself up to take advantage of whatever's coming from a revolutionary standpoint, whether it's AI or some of the things we talked about or don't know about. So that would be my advice. Secondly, my plug, you can catch me on LinkedIn. I have a lot of different things that I publish on there and podcasts and things that I do for the company I work for, more insights and strategy. So looking forward to connecting with whomever wants to reach out. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you so much once again, everybody, for joining in. And if you don't know, this was part of our the Analysts Gone Wild series, for which we meet every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with more stories and exciting ones. So I'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.